7 p.m. The crystal lights suddenly ignited across the Lagos skyline, illuminating a mansion whispered to be one of the most extravagant estates of the year. A line of luxury cars stretched endlessly beyond the gates, engines still warm, cameras flashing relentlessly, and at the very center of it all, Liz Benson appeared, radiant in a breathtaking wedding gown at the age of 60, walking slowly beside the man believed to have changed the course of her life forever, Bishop Great Emeya. What many are calling a $1 million wedding, a night where the world seemed to pause, watching a love story that arrived late but burned brighter than ever imagined. Yet behind the glittering chandeliers and polished marble floors, there were stories, fragments of pain, echoes of loss, moments that led to this exact second. According to sources, Liz had once walked through years marked by silence, by sacrifices, by choices that many never fully understood. A woman admired on screen, yet carrying a private weight that rarely surfaced. And then, there was the bishop, a figure surrounded by influence and faith. A man said to have endured his own chapters of heartbreak and spiritual battles. Their paths, as many believe, were never meant to cross so late. Yet somehow, they did. The music swelled as guests, celebrities, dignitaries, and figures of power filled the grand hall. Whispers moved like waves, some celebrating, some questioning, some recalling the past, moments of alleged betrayal, times when love seemed impossible. As Liz paused at the top of the staircase, her hand trembling ever so slightly, cameras captured a fleeting expression, not just joy, but something deeper, something that hinted at everything she had lost to arrive here. And as Bishop Great Emeya reached for her hand, the crowd erupted, yet according to those close to the couple, that moment was not just about union, it was about healing. About rewriting a narrative that had once been filled with uncertainty. The ceremony unfolded with precision, vows exchanged under a canopy of light, words spoken with a calm that masked the storms they had both weathered. Outside, the night continued to glow, fireworks reflecting against the Lagos sky. But inside, time seemed suspended, as if every second carried the weight of decades, as if every glance between them held unspoken memories. Some say there were tears, not just of happiness, but of release, of letting go of years that could never return. And yet, even in the midst of celebration, subtle tensions lingered. A guest turning away at the mention of the past, a quiet conversation in the corner. A look exchanged that suggested not everyone believed in this fairy tale ending. But still, the night moved forward. Faster, louder, brighter, the music rising, the laughter echoing, the dance floor alive with energy, until gradually, almost imperceptibly, the rhythm began to slow. Guests started to leave, the lights dimmed slightly, and the grandeur softened into something more intimate. Liz stood near the edge of the hall, her gown catching the last strands of light, while Bishop Great Emeya spoke quietly beside her, and for a brief moment, away from the cameras, away from the spectacle, there was only silence between them, a silence filled with everything they had been, everything they had endured, and everything they might still face. Outside, the final car doors closed. The last flashes faded into darkness. And inside that vast mansion, under a chandelier that still shimmered faintly, a single photograph on a nearby table tilted slightly, as if touched by an unseen hand, capturing a younger version of Liz, smiling at a time when none of this had yet happened, and somewhere in that quiet, between past and present, between celebration and memory, the night lingered, unfinished. It began with a scene that many described as unreal, a lavish setting believed to be worth millions of dollars, chandeliers cascading like waterfalls of light, golden tables stretching across a hall filled with power and prestige. And according to sources, the guest list read like a gathering of the most influential names in entertainment and religion: pastors, actors, billionaires, political figures, all seated under one roof. Yet what truly stunned the world was not the luxury, but the woman at the center of it all. Liz Benson, a name once associated with grace, resilience, and quiet strength, stepping once again into a wedding aisle at the age of 60, something many never thought they would witness. Whispers echoed through the room, some guests reportedly turning to one another in disbelief, as if questioning whether this moment was real, because behind that radiant smile was a past many believed had closed the door on love forever, a past marked by deep loss, by emotional wounds that were never fully spoken of. According to those familiar with her journey, Liz had once retreated from the spotlight, carrying a silence that spoke louder than words, a silence shaped by heartbreak, by moments that some described as betrayal, by nights when the future seemed uncertain. And yet, here she was, dressed in white once more, walking slowly beneath the soft glow of candlelight, each step measured, each breath heavy with everything she had lived through. The music began softly, almost hesitant, as if aware of the weight of the moment. And then, Bishop Great Emeya appeared at the end of the aisle, calm, composed, a man believed to have walked his own path through trials of faith and personal struggle. Their eyes met, and for a brief second, the entire room seemed to hold its breath, because according to sources, this was not just a union, it was a collision of two lives that had been broken, reshaped, and somehow brought together at the most unexpected time. But even in that breathtaking moment, tension lingered beneath the surface, a quiet unease among a few guests, subtle glances exchanged, as if the past had not completely released its grip. Some reportedly recalling earlier chapters, moments when love had failed, when trust had been tested, when decisions had led to pain that could not be undone. And yet, the ceremony moved forward. The vows were about to begin. And as Liz stood there, her hands trembling ever so slightly, there was a flicker in her eyes, not just of happiness, but of something deeper, something that suggested this night, no matter how grand, carried with it the weight of everything she had lost, everything she had endured, and everything she might still be risking. And then, the story begins to rewind, far away from the dazzling lights of Lagos, far from the applause and the glittering celebration, back to a quieter time, a colder space, where the silence was heavier than any crowd. According to sources, there was a period when Liz Benson slowly disappeared from the spotlight, not because the world forgot her, but because she chose to step away, a decision many never fully understood, a retreat that, as some believe, was shaped by wounds that ran deeper than anyone could see. Inside an old room, said to have remained almost untouched for years, the air reportedly carried a stillness that felt frozen in time, a wooden table near the window, a thin layer of dust, and beside it, photographs, edges curled, colors fading, moments captured from a life that once seemed complete. yet now looked like fragments of something broken. Some say those pictures told a story of love that did not survive, of promises that were never kept, of nights filled with unanswered questions. And according to whispers, there were rumors of betrayal, stories that were never confirmed, yet never fully denied, stories that lingered in the background, shaping the silence that followed. There were times, it is believed, when Liz would sit alone in that very room, long after the lights outside had gone dark, her gaze fixed on those fading images, as if searching for answers that would never come, as if trying to understand where everything had changed and why. The world outside continued to move forward, faster, louder, brighter, but inside that space, time seemed to stand still, each tick of the clock echoing like a reminder of what had been lost, and perhaps what could never be recovered. Friends, according to some accounts, tried to reach out, to pull her back into the world she once dominated, but she remained distant, guarded, choosing silence over explanation, choosing solitude over attention, and in that, silence. Many questions were left hanging. Was it heartbreak? Was it betrayal? Or was it something even deeper? Something that words could not capture? Years passed. The images grew older. The room grew quieter. And yet, according to those who knew her journey, that chapter was never truly closed. It was simply buried, hidden beneath layers of time, waiting until the night when everything would resurface, when the past would collide with the present under the brightest lights imaginable. And, as the camera slowly returns to the wedding hall, where music continues to play and voices rise in celebration, there is a brief moment, almost invisible, when Liz's eyes seem to drift away from the crowd, just for a second, as if she is seeing something no one else can see, a memory, a shadow, or perhaps a piece of the past that never really left. And just when the story felt like it had reached its quiet ending, when the silence around Liz Benson had become almost permanent, according to sources, someone entered her life in the most unexpected way, not with grand gestures, not with headlines, but with presence. Bishop Great Emeya, a name that, at the time, did not immediately spark speculation, because what grew between them was not loud enough for the world to notice, at least, not at first. It is said their connection began in stillness, in conversations that stretched beyond words, long pauses that somehow spoke louder than any declaration, moments where neither of them needed to explain the past, because perhaps they both understood what it meant to carry invisible wounds. According to those close to the situation, their first meetings were simple, almost ordinary, sitting across from each other, speaking softly, sometimes not speaking at all, the kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, but full of things unspoken, full of memories neither dared to revisit. And slowly, something began to shift, not dramatically, not suddenly, but in small, almost imperceptible ways. Liz, who had once chosen distance, was seen appearing more often, not in front of cameras, but behind the scenes, in places where attention was minimal. And Bishop Great Emeya, always nearby, not at the center, but just close enough, as if he understood that healing does not happen under bright lights, but in quiet corners, where no one is watching. Yet, not everyone was convinced. Whispers began to circulate, questions that grew louder with time. Was this truly love, or simply comfort? Was it a bond formed from faith, or a refuge from loneliness? According to some, there were doubts, subtle, but persistent. A few voices suggesting that what they shared might be temporary, something born out of loss, something that could fade once the pain softened. But others, those who observed more closely, described something different. They spoke of a calm that surrounded Liz when he was present, a calm that had not been seen in years. They noticed the way she listened, the way she smiled, small, almost hesitant, as if she was relearning something she had once lost, and perhaps feared to trust again. There were moments, it is believed, when their conversations extended late into the night, not filled with excitement, but with honesty. The kind of honesty that comes after everything has already been broken, where there is nothing left to pretend, nothing left to hide. And in those moments, according to sources, something deeper began to take shape. Not a sudden passion, but a steady flame, fragile, yet persistent. And still, the question remained, lingering in the minds of many, was this destiny, or simply timing? Was Bishop Great Emeya the man she had been waiting for, or the one who arrived because no one else did? And as the timeline moves forward, as the quiet connection slowly transforms into something the world can no longer ignore, there is a subtle tension that refuses to disappear. Because sometimes, the most powerful love stories are also the ones that carry the heaviest doubts. And as the camera prepares to return once again to that dazzling wedding night, the music rising, the lights shimmering, one question still echoes beneath it all. What truly brought them together? Love, faith, or the silent need to heal what was never fully repaired? And then, the whispers grew louder. What once existed quietly in the shadows could no longer remain hidden, according to sources. The moment their connection became visible, the world responded not with silence, but with division. Headlines began to circulate. Conversations spread across rooms, across screens, across circles of influence. Some voices rose in admiration, calling it a story of healing, of second chances, of a love that arrived exactly when it was needed most. But others were far less convinced. There were those who believed, or at least claimed, that this was not as simple as it appeared, that behind the calm exterior, there might be something more calculated, something arranged, something designed to restore an image, or perhaps to rewrite a narrative that had once been filled with unanswered questions. And as these opinions collided, the pressure began to build, slowly at first, then all at once. According to those close to the situation, Liz and Bishop Great Emeya found themselves at the center of a storm they had never intended to create. Every gesture analyzed, every appearance questioned, every silence interpreted in 100 different ways. There were moments, it is believed, when they chose to step back again, to retreat into the same quiet spaces where their connection had first begun. But this time, the silence felt different, heavier, because now it carried the weight of expectation, of judgment, of doubt. Some guests, some observers, even those who once supported them, reportedly began to question whether what they shared could survive under such scrutiny. Was it strong enough? Was it real enough? Or would it break? Like so many things had before, and according to whispers, there were nights, long and restless, when decisions had to be made, conversations that were not meant for the public, moments when walking away may have seemed easier, safer, more predictable, because staying meant facing everything, the past, the rumors, the fear of repeating old pain. And yet, despite it all, they remained, not with grand declarations, not with dramatic responses, but with a quiet persistence that confused many. Because sometimes, the strongest choices are the ones that make the least noise. There were no public arguments, no attempts to silence the critics, just presence, just consistency. Just two people continuing to stand side by side, even when the world around them refused to settle. And perhaps that was what unsettled people the most. Not the rumors, not the questions, but the fact that neither of them walked away, even when they had every reason to, even when the pressure reached its peak, even when doubt seemed louder than belief, and as the storm slowly began to lose its force, not disappearing, but fading into the background. Something remained, something that could not be easily explained, because sometimes what survives the most scrutiny is not illusion, but something far more difficult to define. And as the timeline moves forward once again, toward the night where everything would finally be revealed under the brightest lights, the echoes of those doubts, those questions, those unspoken fears still linger quietly beneath the surface. And just like that, the story returns to the present, to the night that everyone had been waiting for. A wedding, described by many as nothing short of a dream. The lights shimmered endlessly across the grand hall, reflections dancing on polished floors, the soft echo of music filling every corner, and at the center, Liz Benson stood in a gown that seemed to capture every beam of light, each step she took drawing admiration, applause, disbelief. According to sources, the atmosphere was electric, guests rising to their feet, embracing one another, offering congratulations that felt both joyful and almost relieved, as if witnessing something they had doubted would ever happen. The orchestra swelled, voices blended into laughter, glasses clinked in celebration, and yet, within all that brilliance, there were moments so small, so fleeting, that only a few may have noticed. A slight pause in Liz's movement, just for a second, her eyes lowering, as if something had crossed her mind. A memory, perhaps. A shadow from the past slipping quietly into the present, and then it was gone, replaced again by that composed smile, but not entirely, because according to those watching closely, there was a depth in her expression that could not be hidden by any light, not even on a night like this. And beside her, Bishop Great Emeya, steady, attentive, his hand holding hers, but just a little tighter than before, as if aware of that invisible moment, as if sensing something no one else could see. Some say it was nothing, just the weight of the day, the emotions of a long journey finally reaching its peak. But others believe it meant more, a silent acknowledgement of everything they had walked through to arrive here. The vows were exchanged, voices calm, measured, yet carrying an intensity that resonated far beyond the words themselves. Applause followed, louder than ever, filling the space with a sense of finality, of triumph, of something that had been fought for and finally won. Yet even as the celebration intensified, as the music grew louder, as the dance floor came alive with movement and color, there remained an undercurrent, something subtle, something that lingered just beneath the surface. A glance between two guests, a quiet conversation in the corner, expressions that suggested Not everyone had fully embraced this moment, as if the past, no matter how distant, still existed in fragments, scattered, unresolved. But the night refused to slow down. The energy surged forward, unstoppable. Champagne poured endlessly. Laughter echoed. The couple surrounded by a sea of faces, some genuine, some unreadable. And still, within it all, those small moments continued to appear, almost like cracks in a perfect image. Liz turning slightly away from the crowd, just for a breath. Bishop Emeya leaning closer, speaking softly, words no one else could hear, his hand never leaving hers, holding on, as if afraid that something or someone might slip away again. And as the music reached another crescendo, as the lights shimmered even brighter, the celebration appeared. Complete, flawless, unforgettable. Yet somewhere, in the quiet spaces between the noise, between the smiles, between the flashes of cameras, there was a feeling that this night, no matter how perfect it seemed, was carrying more than just joy, something unspoken, something that refused to fully disappear, even under the brightest lights. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the night began to exhale. The music that once filled every corner softened, fading into the background like a distant memory. One by one, the guests started to leave. The laughter dissolved into quiet goodbyes. The flashing cameras disappeared, until the grand hall that had once felt alive began to feel empty. According to sources, the transformation was striking. A space that had held so much energy now carried a silence that felt almost unfamiliar. Chairs slightly moved, glasses left half full, petals scattered across the polished floor, as if the celebration had passed through like a storm, leaving behind only traces. In a private room nearby, the wedding gown, once radiant under the lights, was now carefully hung, still untouched, its fabric catching only a faint glow from a distant lamp. Beneath it, the shoes placed neatly side by side, no longer moving, no longer part of the spectacle, just objects, quiet, waiting, and somewhere within that stillness, according to whispers, Liz Benson was seen, standing alone in front of a mirror, for a long time, longer than anyone expected. Her reflection staring back at her, not as the bride the world had just celebrated, but as the woman who had lived through everything that led to this night. There were no cameras, no audience, no applause, just silence, and perhaps questions. Some say her expression changed, subtly, almost unnoticeable, the smile fading, replaced by something more distant, more introspective, as if she was searching for something within herself, or confronting something that refused to stay buried. Was it doubt? Was it memory? Or simply the weight of everything finally settling in? According to those who may have caught a glimpse, she did not move for several seconds, maybe longer, her hand resting lightly on the edge of the table, her eyes fixed on her own reflection, as if trying to recognize the person staring back, as if asking a question that had no clear answer. Outside, the final car drove away, its sound fading into the night, leaving the mansion surrounded by a stillness that felt almost too complete. And somewhere in the distance, a faint echo of music still lingered, like a reminder of what had just taken place, and what had already begun to disappear. And then, just as quietly, Bishop Great Emeya appeared at the doorway, not stepping in immediately, just standing there, watching, his presence calm, steady, yet unreadable, as if he understood that this moment, this silence, belonged to her. His hand resting lightly against the frame, waiting, not interrupting, not speaking, just there. And in that fragile pause, between what had been celebrated and what was yet to come, something unspoken filled the space, something that could not be captured, not by cameras, not by words, only by the silence itself, stretching, lingering, refusing to fully let go. And then, almost imperceptibly, a soft breeze slipped through the slightly open window, lifting the thin curtain just enough to let the night breathe into the room. The fabric moved gently, rhythmically, as if time itself had slowed down. On a nearby table, a photograph of Liz Benson from many years ago rested quietly, its edges worn, its colors softened by time. And then, with the faintest motion, it tilted, just slightly, as though touched by something unseen, a memory, perhaps, or the quiet passage of everything that had led to this moment. The light from outside fell diagonally across the room, painting everything in a muted golden hue. The mirror, the gown hanging in silence, the shoes placed neatly below, all bathed in a stillness that felt almost unreal. Outside, the world continued to speak, voices rising across headlines and conversations, describing a $1 million wedding, a night of luxury, a love story that defied time. But inside that space, none of it seemed to matter anymore, because within those walls, there were no cameras, no applause, no expectations, only echoes. Echoes of a past that had never fully disappeared. Echoes of emotions that refused to fade, according to some. Liz Benson had not moved for a while, her presence still lingering in the room, as if part of her remained there, even after she had stepped away, and somewhere, in the quiet distance of the hallway, the faint sound of footsteps could almost be heard, or perhaps imagined. A pause, then nothing. And the photograph, still slightly tilted, continued to hold its place, capturing a version of her that once existed without the weight of everything that followed. A version untouched by loss, by doubt, by the long road that led to this night. And as the curtain moved once more, casting shifting shadows across the walls, the room seemed to breathe, slowly, deeply, holding on to something that could not be named, something that lingered between what had been celebrated and what had never truly been resolved. And somewhere in that silence, in that fragile space between past and present, between light and shadow, the story did not end. It simply remained.